Dear colleagues, dear friends, we start in 1 minute, exactly.
Challenges of turning Europe progressive.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I warmly welcome you all on behalf of the Progressive Caucus. I do believe that this event can be the departing point for closer cooperation of the progressive forces ahead to the European elections, but also after the European elections. It is a great opportunity to have with us today the leaders of GUE-NGL, the Greens, and the S&D on the same table and discuss the challenges we have to face, but also the agenda we can put forward against the neoliberal and the far-right forces. What are the risks we are facing? Which are our proposals to relaunch the European integration process? We have to deal with the rise of nationalism, racist and xenophobic forces. We have to deal with neoliberal policies, huge tax evasion, austerity and social dumping, growing inequalities, lack of transparency, but also the challenge of the climate change. We are witnessing a huge disappointment by a growing number of EU citizens who no longer trust the political institutions and resort to extreme light solutions to pass their message. And what is that message? That they are fed up with neoliberalism and they want an EU that serves their interests, that improves social cohesion, brings transparency in decision-making, and provides a sustainable growth model, a new social agenda in favor of the big majority of the citizens, for the many and not for the few. Are they wrong? Not at all. They are absolutely right. This is why we need to be clear in our proposals, to prioritize what it is most important for the people. Let me now switch for a couple of minutes to my mother language. Αγαπητές φίλες και φίλοι, απέναντι σε αυτές τις προκλήσεις, οφείλουμε να έχουμε και ξεκάθαρη στόχευση. Απέναντι στις προτάσεις και τα
We need to be clear.
Απέναντι στις νεοφιλελεύθερες επιλογές, απέναντι στη διχαστική ρητορική των ακροδεξιών δυνάμεων, η απάντηση προοδευτικό σενάριο που λείπει αυτή τη στιγμή από την Ευρώπη και από την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Είναι αυτό που ονομάσαμε με το κείμενό μας η Εκτελεστική Επιτροπή του Progressive Caucus The Missing Scenario. The Missing Progressive Scenario. Τι θέτουμε λοιπόν ως προτεραιότητα το Progressive Caucus στη δική μας πρόταση και ως πρόκληση αμέσως μαζί μας. Πρώτον, τη σύνδεση της παραγωγικής ανάπτυξης με την αύξηση των μισθών και τη δίκαιη αναδιανομή του παραγόμενου πλούτου. Δεύτερον, τη διαχείριση του ευρωπαϊκού δημόσιου χρέους με τρόπο επικοδομητικό, που να δίνει ανάσα στις εθνικές οικονομίες και κοινωνίες, που δεν θα αναπαράγει τα ίδια αδιέξοδα και τον φαύλο κύκλο της λιτότητας. Τρίτον, την προστασία των δημόσιων αγαθών, την ενίσχυση των δημόσιων επενδύσεων, την ενσωμάτωση της έννοιας βιωσιμότητα, sustainability, ως δομικό στοιχείο του αναπτυξιακού μας προτύπου. Και τέταρτον, και πολύ σημαντικό, την προστασία του περιβάλλοντος, την επίτευξη των στόχων της Συμφωνίας του Παρισιού για την κλιματική αλλαγή, την προστασία του φυσικού μας πλούτου με δεσμευτικούς φιλόδοξους όρους για όλα τα κράτη-μέλη. Dear friends, we need to debate our core priorities, to repoliticize the debate on values, on equality, and the moral dimension of policy choices. We have to create a strong progressive alliance based on a common ground of proposals that can play a decisive role in the EU level, to combine realism with progressive radicalism, to combine a visionary left approach with realistic progressive solutions. And also, now we are specifically faced with the surge of the far right. We need to build communication channels with other democratic forces to confront neo-fascism and neo-Nazism that are dangerously spread across Europe. It is up to us to push for a fair and sustainable European integration and address the concerns of the European citizens. It is up to us to overcome existing burdens and make our agenda work. Let's make people trust our proposals. Let us change Europe. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to my colleague Eva Joly, member of the steering committee of the Progressive Caucus, coming from the French Greens, who will chair the first panel of our event. Thank you very much.
Merci, Dimitri.
Thank you, Dimitros. Dear friends, Europe is not doing well. Instead of giving hope to the citizens, it has become the cemetery of our illusions. There is more and more hatred, populism throughout the continent, and of course this is jeopardizing everything, and there are more and more inequalities. It has a jeopardizing effect on the social tissue. Where has the dream of the founder fathers gone? And if competition, free competition, it becomes more and more an obstacle, if nothing is done to build or policies in order to welcome migrants, it's going to be a massive problem. It's about us, European progressive movements. We need to act together, hand in hand, and it's about moving forward together. It's about going forward with our progressive caucuses. I know our differences. I'm aware of our differences, but I'm also aware of the weight of our enemies. Take Orban, Salvini, and the others. They are trying to impose their political agenda in name of a vision. They should not have the monopoly. We have to refuse that there be social indifference, because, of course, it's becoming more and more disappointing for everyone. You're going to tell me that I'm not perhaps indicating the way we need to take. That's the debate of this evening. Political actors from different horizons are going to confront their strategies. It's about saying what we can build together, actually, and at the end of the day. But what I'd also like to say is that when we talk about political will, we have this main question regarding our period. That's to say, for decades, the liberals made us believe that invisible rules were extremely important for our society, and that there were no other solutions than the liberal solution, and we've been abiding by this liberal approach for too long. The ecologist I am only knows this natural law, that is the law of ecosystems. And also, instead of kneeling whilst facing the financial actors, we have to save the climate. Instead of trying to take all the oil available, we need to focus on ecology. Instead of abiding by these absurd budgetary lines, it's about placing other values at the heart of our society. Dear friends, progressive caucuses, let's move forward hand in hand. We have a lot of struggles in front of us. Be convinced that it's from us that answers will come from. I'd like to thank the president of the group. I'd like to thank Ska Keller, from the Green Party, Gabi Zimmer, from the UNGL. I'd like to thank you all for your presence tonight, and thank you for the answers you're going to be discussing regarding these main fights. So the S&D, Greens, EFA, GUE, and GL. So I'll give the floor to Udo Bullmann, S&D.
Thanks very much, Dimitrios. Thanks very much, Eva. Thanks all of you for coming tonight to this conversation, to which I am looking forward to, because I was hoping for an event like that for long, so that the progressives can exchange their views, exchange the analysis, whether we agree in the main points, and hopefully also to set out a strategy that has to be followed through in the next mandate when the big fight is going to come. Let me say that I share a whole lot of what was already said. Yes, Europe is in front of major challenges. You already named it: globalization, climate change, worldwide migration, digital capitalism is threatening people. And people are afraid of losing control over their societies, over their lives. And under pressure, very, very often, as you see in our member states, they fall victim to the extreme right. They offer the story: yes, you can take back control, backward looking, going the nationalist, the radical right-wing path, spreading hatred in societies as well as amongst nations. This is not our way. We have to be serious. Yes, we have to take back control over the development in our societies, but this take back control can only be a take back control in Europe as a European response to these big challenges. Is this enough? No. A whole lot of people would say, yes, Europe is the answer. Yes, Europe is the answer, but not this Europe we are in. We have to correct Europe. We need change. We need radical change of the European development so that people are not anymore irritated, that it's not about anonymous markets, but about the citizens' needs in Europe. And for how long we were already on the wrong track, you can see by the huge amount of people having been driven to the right wing. The good story is that economic models, as well as technologies, industrial machines, but also economic structures, social structures, are manufactured by human beings. And if you look at the big changes of the last 100 years or 150 years, we proved already that we can redo, we can organize change of the industrial system, we can change the economic model. We did in the big industrialization by inventing rights of industrial workers, by inventing democracy. That was the progressive, that was the working class movements. And we also did after the Second World War by inventing the post-war consensus and the post-war social welfare state. But the right did as well. In the 80s and 90s, the right turned to the radical, extreme position, the neoliberal path, and they was dismantling the social welfare state. Now we are in a new phase where the progressives are challenged again to combine all their energy, all their commitment to change the path of this insane development of capitalistic structures. What we say, and we try to reform our work in our group, many people will have realized that, we renovated our political program, we renovated our internal structures. We are working now in the Socialists and Democrats according to the compass of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 2030 Sustainable Development Promises. And we would like to implement that in the European politics as a concrete proposal, as a concrete commitment to the well-being, as we say, the well-being of all. A transformation, a radical transformation of the way in which the economy is run, of the way in which we do environmental politics, and of the way in which we reorganize the social welfare state in a way that nobody is left behind and no territory is left behind. The new thing for us is that we do not play against each other. Economy, environment, the social dimension, we need strategies that are mutually supportive. And we try to reach out to friends, comrades, colleagues in the trade unions, in the civic movements, to organize what we call a progressive society. This is the name of our new tool. And within this progressive society, we have set up an independent commission coming up with concrete proposals. We have launched that today in a little booklet of 100 pages with 110 concrete proposals. We have here Luca Cazzeli, our co-president of the independent commission. Luca is a former minister of labor in Greece and today a professor of economics in Athens. And she and Polnio Rasmussen as well, the two chairs of our independent commissions, did a whole lot of work to bring together more than 30 experts to contribute to that. What we say in a nutshell, yes, we need this ecological transition of capitalism, but it can only be well done if we at the same time reduce inequalities, if we work for a society which is mutually supportive and inclusive, socially inclusive. This is the big mistake Macron is doing at the very moment when he tries to shape environmental politics for the happy few but not for the many. So we have an offer to make to our fellow friends in the GUE and to the Greens. I have only 2 copies, spare copies left for you. I would give it to you as a present. This is what we presented, what we launched today. Regard it as an invitation for our discourse, as an invitation for collaboration, as an invitation to your criticism and to your proposal. Thanks very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'll go give the floor to Ska Keller, co-president from the Greens.
Everyone for joining this debate, which I think is really, really important to have because the title, after all, of this event and this panel is How to Turn Europe into a Progressive Direction, and I think that's desperately needed. In order to know how to turn it into a progressive direction, I would actually argue that the idea of the European Union is, as such, in itself, a progressive idea. And that might be a bit controversial for some, but I really think it is. And I think it is that for 2 reasons. First of all, because it's being attacked on itself from the far-right direction. It's being attacked from the anti-social far-right groups for the reason that Europe is a symbol of something that it is not always, like it's a symbol of things like overcoming differences, bridging over borders. It stands for cooperation. It even stands for something like humanitarian ideals. And we all know in the room, and especially all the MEPs around, know that how very much flawed the implementation of these ideals is. Nevertheless, the European Union is the symbol for that, and that's why it gets attacked from Orban, for example. Orban says, oh, Brussels will send all the refugees, which is not true, because unfortunately we're more and more closing the borders, which is a big mistake, but it's the symbol. And I think that symbols are important. They're not the whole picture, but they're part of the picture. And secondly, I think that the European Union is such a progressive project because if we look at the founding principles of the European Union, they were fairly progressive. That's peace, it's prosperity, and it's democracy. And those things are still relevant today. If we look at peace, sure, within our 28 member states, we have managed to get the longest peace period ever, which I think is extremely relevant, and we should not forget how important that is, and how long we have been suffering, our forefathers and mothers have been suffering from the opposite of what we have right now. Now we solve problems with words and in very long meetings and compromises and so on, but that's much better than anything we had before. So that is relevant. But it also means that the European Union right now has to be able to answer to challenges that we have right now that also affects peace, for example. And I'm thinking there about climate change, because climate change is one of the biggest security risks that we have worldwide. Maybe not among us, because there we are the happy few, while we have, maybe not us personally, but our forefathers and mothers have created by far most of the CO2 emissions. It's now affecting much poorer regions, regions where people will have to flee from the islands because they are drowning. People will have to go away from regions which are becoming impossible to inhabit or to work on because of climate change. So this is really a big security risk and a security problem which the European Union needs to address if it wants to keep up this image of being a peace project, which I think it should. Prosperity. We have already been mentioning, all of us, the issue of social Europe, which is desperately lacking. Because right now we have indeed freedoms in the European Union which are mainly relevant for those who can afford them, who are actually using the capital freedom, for example, the freedom of transferring goods, that's nice and nice, but it's not relevant for a large part of the society in the sense that the European Union right now does not provide social protection for a lot of people. And from my point of view, and I guess we all agree, that needs to change. We cannot allow that we have super strict economic rules, you have the limits on debt and whatever, but when it comes to social rights, then that's just a nice to have, declarations which are not binding, that needs to change. But the ideal of providing prosperity for all is very, very important. And also there, if we think, for example, about globalization, which is a big problem for workers' rights, which is a big problem, or let's say challenge for our local industries, our local manufacturers. Also, this is an issue where we need the European Union to address that, because a single member state will not be able to find, a way out or a special way on globalization. Also, tax justice is such a thing where it's obvious that we need to have the European cooperation, but then we need to have it. Because one state alone cannot make Apple or whoever pay their fair share of taxes. But in order to fulfill that promise, we need to make it happen. And there we, of course, also know that the problem is not so much even the Commission, it's not so much the Parliament, not at all, but the problem is the Member States. So right now they are blocking, and especially Germany, for example, are blocking a very important key promise of the European Union, and that we need to overcome. So I think if we want to turn Europe into the right direction, it also always means that we need to get proper majorities in the member countries, because we can have fantastic majorities here in the European Parliament, which will be great, but it also needs the second chamber, so to say, the member states. And then the promise of democracy that the European Union has always been living with. New member states joined because that was a promise of sustainable democracy, of good governance, of rule of law, and this is currently under attack by the same far-right forces that are attacking the European Union, because again it stands as a symbol of democracy, civil liberties. We see that in Hungary, we see it in Poland, we see it in Austria, we see it in Romania, and like many different countries. And I think the European Union has the task, a new task basically, to defend that democracy and civil liberties everywhere for all EU citizens, so that no one is left out of that very import of civil liberties and rights. And that is a new task that the European Union needs to cover in order to fulfill that promise. So I think if we look at topics, the new challenges that the European Union has to deal with is the social dimension and it's the democratic dimension. The challenges, the global challenges that as such should be there. It's just we're not doing it properly, thinking about climate. So I'm arguing for, as progressive forces, being clearly for the European ideal and project, as well as at the same time being extremely much for change, because we need to change. And especially because we want this project to succeed, we need to change it. So it's an inherent thing that goes together. I also think on a more practical level that in order to turn Europe into a progressive direction, we need to make sure that we're sitting on the right playing field, that we're not playing on the field of the far right, but that we're putting our own topics forward, that we're talking about social rights, that we're talking about ecological changes, that we're talking about the transformation of the economy, all of those things, that we're talking about that rather than running behind far right or centre right, whatever issues. Also, I think we need to have concrete proposals on the table. And there we can, of course, argue about which is the right way forward and so on, as long as we agree on the direction. Concrete proposals about how to implement that social Europe, how exactly Europe can protect the democratic rights and civil liberties of its citizens. I think that is needed. And, of course, we need to build majorities. I already hinted at that in the member states. For having governments, we need to have a progressive council in order to make things happen properly. And we need to reach out to civil society actors, bigger ones, but also smaller ones, because I think there is a lot of support for progressive ideas. But people might be disillusioned, they might be thinking, okay, Europe is far away, and we need to get down to earth there and build these alliances with different civil society actors. And I think then we can turn Europe into a progressive direction. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup, Ska.
Thank you very much. Gabi Zimmer.
I would like to speak in German, because we have an excellent translation, and in this case I use my mother language. Okay, you are ready?
Okay, is everyone ready? Well, I start where the previous two speakers gave us some insight already. And I want to say this with all clarity. We have to discuss today what we talk about, what we mean when we talk about a progressive Europe. On Sunday, we witnessed the signature of the withdrawal agreement. 28 heads of government put the signature on the paper. And I think it's one of the most significant steps back we ever witnessed in the European Union. And I wonder, can we carry on as usual? Is it business as usual in the European Union? Just more speedily? More of the old business, as we heard recently when we celebrated 60 years of signing the Treaty of Rome? Or is it about really questioning what has been going on so far and how we have been dealing with things so far? Now, looking back, I find one thing. Establishing the European Union happened with the context of the Second World War, and with the understanding never again will we allow that strong economic forces can enforce a war and really drive people into the abyss. And at the same time, something else was linked to this. There was the desire to have a European Union or its predecessor organization based on certain values, to make certain that it develops into a union of shared, joint values. What do we see today? Today's European Union has little to do with the original myth of its foundation. In principle, it's a European Union of the past century, characterized by the experience of the Second World War, of the Cold War, of the breakdown of the state socialism, especially in Eastern Europe, and much less characterized by being a Europe and being Europe in a world where we have very diverse, very new challenges. For example, the European Union and globalization. There's a lot of unanswered questions out there. We lack a definition, for example, how we as the European Union can be a global actor. We still think along lines of having power, of strength, of keeping your power, access to global markets, using resources out there, and using energy, having access to energy. These are still the guiding lines of our thoughts, so it's more power-driven. And it's less driven by the question, what could be the active contribution of the European Union for peace, global peace, to mitigate climate change, to enhance worldwide justice and fairness? So a lot has to happen in a different context of the different approach and understanding. That's one thing. And then when we have a discussion on how can we have a more progressive orientation for Europe, then we should include an answer to the question, when do we talk about Europe and when do we talk about the European Union? I think it's an important differentiation, clarify the context. Otherwise we pull the wool over each other's eyes. It was easy for the social democratic movement to say, we desire a different Europe. But there is one question here. What's the precondition in order to have a different Europe? If you want a different Europe, you require a different EU. The current EU, with its orientation, with its power structure and its treaties at the foundation of it all, will not be able to open the pathway that leads us to a different Europe. We have concretely defined borders. We have concretely defined rules and treaties governing the European Union. There are economic and political powers that created that. It did not just come up quickly and unexpectedly. It was and is the product of concrete actors, concrete persons who work towards that. And we could change it because that is the case, but we need to know which screws to activate. Now, let's look at the background. It's about an absolute change, a real turnaround, also with regard to the orientation of governments and the political forces in quite a few member states. Yes, they say yes to the European Union and the next election campaign. So they're busy doing that. And we have to be busy defining our positions, even beyond the left. What can we offer to bring people together? Can we clarify the next months what our concrete initiatives would be? It's not the Austrian government. It's not about the Orban government. And other governments may follow suit who want to cancel the UN Migration Pact. We have a discussion even in Germany in the matter. We have to expect that the far-right forces will gain even more force. In Austria, for example, the so-called blue-black project, a conservative party enters into a deal or a pact with a clearly fascistic party. What we observe is a different approach vis-à-vis the European Union and Europe. So far we said, well, on the extreme right they are agreed that it's a European patchwork of nations they desire. But in Austria that's a different objective, I observe. The objective is rather, let's modify the European Union so that it helps us to get rid, to prevent migrants and Muslims. Here I see a danger. Namely, the Austrian government would want to modify the European Union to use it to defend the Christian Europe. That's where I see a danger. And we have to be aware of this if we discuss how we want to change the world. And it requires that we present concrete demands, concrete projects. Where is the priority as well? I say this because there is also one danger, I say. In the left, also many say the European Union is an imperialistic tool and we cannot reform it. I read that recently with Attack Austria. So they rather want to get outside of the EU. So maybe we should understand what are the topics that unite us. And I know that it's difficult, thinking of TTIP. What is truly feasible? That should be at the core of our discussion. Are we in a position where various positions defended in our election campaigns, in our manifestos, could we uphold them even if they are in the other party's manifesto, not in our own party's manifesto? Or the social democratic idea of a child guarantee, that was one of the ideas or proposals, and I like it. Or could we have an understanding with regard to another initiative? Coming from the European Network Against Poverty, namely a campaign this summer on behalf of a European minimum income at such a level in the various countries that in that country no one needs to live in poverty. Are we capable to share forces to defend so-called labor employment insurance? So an unemployment insurance where everyone pays a contribution and that really helps when there is a need to get help. Would we be in favor of working towards the establishment of a European strike fund, a fund that would enable people to have transnational strikes in a variety of countries? So that we really stand up against the attempts to pit one people or one group of people against the other. I think such ideas would help us. And I think it would also help when I think of something else. If we are not concrete, then the interpretation will also be non-concrete. And then you have all kinds of ideas and understanding circulate, and you already hear the first signs of that. So concrete discussions and concrete proposals are necessary. We need to describe very concretely what we would like to see happen. And yes, we also require the following from a left, from a progressive side. We need a new vision for Europe and for the European Union. I like to think back to 1941, the Ventotene Manifest. A couple of prisoners on the island in Italy of Ventotene, the darkest hour of the last century, 1941. Hardly anyone saw light at the end of that tunnel. That was the year they wrote their manifesto. If we want a different Europe, if we want a Europe without wars, then we must make a contribution to make certain that the national economies and the national states no longer attack each other. We need a Europe of a socialist nature. They used that word. And then we had the real state socialism that threw a spanner in the works. Okay. But isn't it time for us to think of our version, our vision, another vision of the Europe and the European Union and the integration we desire? Shouldn't that be possible? What do we actually want? Human rights, indivisible. Collective and individual rights, social rights and freedom or liberty rights are the absolute must for every human being who lives in the European Union, independently of the member states or the region. They are entitled to these rights. A permanent European citizenship could be discussed. Last week I met people from Great Britain and they asked me, Well, because of the Brexit, how is it possible that our European citizenship can be taken away? It's possible because there is not an individual right to be a European citizen. And let's look at the values, the European Charter of Foundational Rights, etc., that mentions European citizenship. They must become rights that are individual rights and enforceable rights. Well, you may say this is not the revolutionary turnaround. Well, I would answer you that's more revolutionary than many other ideas you may be aware of. And it's really about putting movement back into the proceeding, in also enhancing trust. And it also means not to look just backwards to the past and maybe reviving old cliches. No, it's about lively debate that also includes concrete proposals and ideas for cooperation. A couple of aspects where we see the clear need to do something to really put up the pressure, because they're absolutely necessary for having the Europe we desire to have. So sometimes it may mean really to be courageous enough to do that.
Donc un grand merci à nos intervenants qui chacun.
Thank you very much to the speakers who highlighted, three of them, what brings us together here, the relevance of Europe, the relevance of our future, and also the difficulties that we will face ahead of us. Cambridge Analytica manipulating us, the Brexit, the ecological transition, which is not really here, not really there yet, in spite of what the EU is doing. I will now invite Ernest Urtasun to come here to chair the second panel. The second panel will be about the priorities of the EU after the elections. Once again, thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think it's one of the few occasions where we had the three leaders of the progressive forces in the European Parliament in the same event. I think it's something that we need to strengthen further in the coming years. And this is why the Progressive Caucus, we absolutely wanted them three to be here with us. Now I would like to ask the speakers of the next panel. I would like to ask Costas Douzinas from SYRIZA to join me. I think he's coming here. Welcome. Agnieszka Dziemianowicz-Bak, is she here from RAZEM? Please join us. Sarah SoilihiÂ, elle est là. Ouais, je pense que j'ai vu.
I think she is here. Please come up on stage. And then for Ecolo, Evelyne Huytebroeck.
Panel from the Progressive Caucus. We wanted also to have forces from the left and from the Greens, from different countries of Europe, different contexts, also to follow up on what was pointed out by the three chairs of the three progressive groups in the parliament, and that is why I'm very happy to have with me SYRIZA, RAZEM, Generation, and Ecolo. Unfortunately, the representative of the Sinn Féin, Chris Hazard, who was supposed to be with us today, he cannot join us for a last-minute problem. He could not be here with us. But I'm sure we'll be able to have a very good discussion with the following panel, and then we'll jump immediately also to the discussion with the MEPs present and the audience. So, which priorities for the EU after the elections? Maybe I will turn to Costas Douzinas first, and maybe, there was a lot of food for thought from the three previous speakers. I would like to ask you, as a member of SYRIZA, how do you see the priorities for the progressive agenda in the next term? Please stick to the 8 minutes that has been allocated to each of you. Thank you.
As Gabi said, last year the European Union celebrated its 60th birthday. The birthday was overshadowed by a divorce, the rise of a deviant child, and the probable death, a funeral. The divorce, of course, is Brexit, and as someone who lived in London for 40 years, my heart bleeds over Brexit. The deviant child, of course, is the rise of this extreme Euro-rejectionist, nationalistic right wing. And when Trump, Brexit, Le Pen happened, people said politics has gone mad. No, it had not gone mad. It was quite predictable, because globalized neoliberalism has a structural contradiction. On the one hand, it needs open markets, deregulated finance, it needs open borders, but that creates huge structural inequalities and huge increases in unemployment. And the probable death, I'm sorry to say, is the end, perhaps, of that inexorable march to political integration, the ever closer union. Because the reform proposals that we have seen so far, that answer that anger and indignation from the European people, do not seem to be able actually to give an effective response. The agreement between Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Macron is a light version of the Macron proposals, which was a decaffeinated version of the Thomas Piketty proposals. So the chasm between people and the European elites remains where it is. And therefore we have a huge problem in our hands, but we also have an extraordinary opportunity, because the elite proposals and projects seem to have failed to a large extent, but unfortunately that anger, that emotional, affective response has been captured by the extreme right wing. And here we are, and as left and progressive people, we have two major tasks for the next period. One is about assembling a new left, a new progressive left. The second is creating a Europe, or putting together projects and programs that will create a Europe for the people. In other words, a Europe that is not one size fits all, but a new Europe that is being created from the bottom up. So two projects. The first is about the reassembly or the assembly of left and progressive forces, a new idea, a new organizational but also ideological project to bring together the different forces of the left and progressive Europe, and I think this caucus is an extremely important beginning in this direction. 3 quick points. First, the extreme right wing, the nationalists, the Euro-rejectionists, have created a negative utopia, a dystopia, which unfortunately has attracted lots of people. It has spoken to a certain sense of abandonment, of humiliation, of impoverishment, and we on the left perhaps have failed to create our own social and political utopia. The left is theory in action. We have abandoned theory, we have perhaps been seduced by the economists, and therefore we have abandoned identity politics, and we have abandoned been abandoned to the fake lies of the new black international, the new black front that is at this very moment developing throughout Europe. So what we need is to go back and think about a new kind of theoretical and ideological project for the left. We in Greece have started with other comrades around Europe trying to work in this direction, and it is extremely important because we have again to take account that people have not just material, but they also have spiritual, educational and cultural needs. And therefore this is an extremely important part of any new left theory or left ideology and has to happen pretty soon. For the left, the second question is organizational. We have certain successes in Corbyn's Labour Party, in Podemos. We have therefore to learn from those successes because the party format as we know it is declining everywhere in Europe. Only 4% of European citizens are members of parties. Therefore we need to change that by creating new ideas, new forms of organization and of being together. And the third is that I think we need the creation of a pan-European public sphere of debate and cooperation with social movements, with resistance movements, with social economy movements, with civil society associations of all types. We have to forget perhaps and closer within our own party format and think about a wider future. If we turn very briefly also for 2 points to Europe that starts again from the bottom up, that it is not one size fits all. I would say that in terms of Europe, the first, of course, priority, and it was very clear in the four introductory messages we get at the beginning, is the creation of a new social contract, of a new type of Europe that puts social justice, social economic rights at the forefront. That is something which we desperately need, and I think the wider possible alliances and coordination of activities and forces is absolutely necessary. The second, I think, question about the European Union is to repoliticize politics. And how do we do that? We do it, I think, by trusting the transformative power of ordinary people, the transformative power of those tacit and practical knowledges that ordinary people have, and by putting together knowledge, transformative power, we can even start thinking about new forms of ownership, new kinds of ways that could eventually challenge the predominant capitalist mode. The final one is about the European Union itself. We need, as I said, to reboot the institutional structure. And that rebooting has to take into account that while nation, socialism, human rights have inspired the European people and have created huge movements in different historical epochs and today, the European Union has not actually managed to inspire people in exactly the same way. And that means to me that we have to think about a different kind of Europe. A kind of Europe that accepts that local, regional and national attachments are extremely important and they have to be respected. Therefore, we could think in terms of the multi-speed Europe that is being proposed to us, which has a strong core and the periphery of excluded more or less states, about a multiple Europe in which we can create different baskets of powers and competencies and resources, and member states may come in or out. But the most important thing is that we need again to put the people at the center. We need to increase the democratic, I think, powers, competencies, both of the European Union, this Parliament, of our own parliaments, local authorities, regional authorities. Europe can be saved only by the left at this point in time. I think the right wing and the right-wing social democrats basically still go on the mantra of business as usual. The only people who have the imagination, not necessarily the organization or the approval of the people as yet, it is we in these people who, with the powers we represent in this room. We need to do it. If we don't do it, I'm afraid that the existential crisis, the probable death of the political integration project will become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Costas, and I'd like to give the floor to Agnieszka. Poland has been in our debates a lot during this legislature, and I think it's very important for us to hear from progressive forces from Poland and see what are your views on the cooperation of progressive forces in Europe. So thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure for me to take part in this event that clearly shows that cooperation and discussion among progressive forces from different parties, from different countries is possible, and it is indeed needed. From what I understand, this is the last meeting of this term of European Parliament, and I've been listening with great interest about about all of the progressive groups have achieved and what you are going to do in coming years. And coming from a Polish progressive leftist party, RAZEM, but also from a pan-European, pro-democratic, pro-European progressive coalition of movements called European Spring, that we established along with political parties from across the continent in order to push for more integrated, more socially just, more equal Europe. I would like to stress two main areas and two main topics that, in our opinion, need to be addressed not only by one or other group, but they need to be addressed by different groups, different progressive forces in order to be fully and properly taken care of. First one, which in my opinion is particularly important if we want to build a real solidarity, not only solidarity and cooperation between politicians, MEPs and different progressive groups, but actually between European citizens from different countries, is a topic of workers' rights and labour market regulation. The EU, as we know it, gave its workers the right to move, but not the same pay for the same work, not the same rights and social protection or the same living standards. Polish plumbers, construction workers and carers who arrived in Belgium, Germany or France or other EU countries accepted to work longer hours for less money than the locals because working conditions in their home countries like Poland are even worse. And those double standards based on nationality created resentment between local workers and newcomers, as well as increased nationalism and xenophobia. And those are challenges that we all understand that they are one of the biggest challenges that European Union and Europe is facing. In the last 2 decades, millions of workers from Poland and other East Central European countries have made an enormous contribution to the economic growth and prosperity across the entire continent. But what we believe in RAZEM and in European Spring is high time that the European Union delivers on promises of better wages at their home countries so that immigration is no more a necessity. It should be a choice. The free movement idea was about freedom of choice where one wants to live. So hard work should be rewarded at home as much as it is rewarded abroad. And I think that all of us, we know how to achieve that. We can discuss the particular instruments, but we know where to look for them. We have to improve and harmonise labour standards, such as minimum wage or working time. We must apply the same rules across the continent to prevent treating any country as a periphery, where companies can make a quick profit at the expense of its citizens. The second concrete form, because as Gabi Zimmer mentioned that we need to have very concrete proposals that we could debate on. So the second concrete form of injustice and inequality that we all as progressive forces need to challenge is the inequality of the political rights of Europe inhabitants. At RAZEM and at European Spring, we believe that Europe urgently needs a radical change in the way it thinks about migration of Europeans. We must stop thinking about it as separate processes of emigration and immigration and start to talk about internal migration within one European organism. The political crisis in almost all Western countries revolves around the exclusion of the newcomers from the shrinking system of social benefits and workers' rights. Masses of people around whom the debate revolves have zero say about themselves. That was the case in Brexit. A lot of people who lived in the UK couldn't vote in the referendum, even though the effects of this voting clearly affects them. We believe that it's the time to give migrants full political rights in their new homes, to make residency and not exclusive citizenship the legal basis for voting rights also in national elections. It shouldn't be that people can decide who take their garbage, because they can decide when they have those rights in local elections. They should be allowed to decide about much bigger, much more important issues as well. Only with such rights, migrants can emancipate themselves from a status of a human resource and second-class citizens and become political actors. And this is crucial if we really want to create European public space, or if we want to revive the notion of European democracy, which is currently a little bit suffering. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to give the floor to Sarah Soilihi, si je bien prononcer.
If I pronounce right.
A lot of things are happening in France lately, and I'm sure we'd like all of us to hear how is the left developing and the prospects and the proposal for the next elections. Thank you for being with us.
Tout d'abord, je souhaitais...
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Progressive Caucus for inviting me. What you're doing here by fostering this dialogue between the forces from the left and from the Greens is really important here at the European Parliament, but also everywhere in Europe. Personally, I never thought that the left, the various left, were irreconcilable. I think that if we are to fight nationalism and liberalism in Europe, we need to be united, and we need to be anchored in a strong left. We need to make concrete proposals that will have an impact on the daily lives of Europeans, and we need to be a force for proposals for concrete ecological and solidarity ideas. I grew up in the northern neighborhoods of Marseille, one of the poorest area in Marseille, and we've been trying for a number of years to create a Europe, well, in a very humble way and modest way. I will explain what I'm saying. If we are to coexist together with other human beings coming from other cultures and other countries, if we are to welcome and help people fleeing war and suffering, then yes, Marseille is a miniature Europe. But in Marseille, like in many other cities, there are citizens who suffer and are far, far from the current Europe. And where is Europe in disadvantaged neighborhoods? You know, those fathers, those mothers who make everything to make ends meet, And the youth as well does not believe in the future, does not believe in Europe, and does not vote anymore. It's to have a more social, more solidarity Europe, a more humane Europe as well, that I became engaged in politics. We are engaged for a future so as to have a more social, more solidarity, and more ecological Europe. I'm also practice sports at a very high level. I used to be on a ring, and I feel that Europe is in a corner, taking blows because many want to destroy it. My question to you, citizens of the left, you need to put on your gloves and to fight. Fight for those who suffer every day. Europe must be at the center of the ring. Europe must fight back so as to have our Europe, a Europe with more solidarity, a more humane, more ecological, a greener Europe, doing outreach to poor people, to disadvantaged neighborhoods, to associations. We need to do outreach to all the people who fight every day for their kids. You can rely on us. You can count on us. We believe in Europe. Personally, I'm sure that we are not against Europe. It's the current EU that is against Europe. And I want to tell you today that I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for your invitation. As a big sports woman told me one day, courage, force, and honor for the next European election.
Merci beaucoup et finalement.
Thank you. I'll give the floor now to Evelyne Huytebroeck. My name is also very complicated, so thank you for being with us, and I'm now giving you the floor so that you can explain the vision of the Green Party, Ecolo, and what's at stake, basically, for us. Thank you, Ernest. I'll be speaking French, despite the fact that my name is Huytebroeck, but that's Belgium for you. So thank you once again for testifying. You said you were from Marseille, from the city, and quite honestly, I must tell you that I was brought up in a municipality that has been well known for 3 years now, Molenbeek Saint-Jean, here in Brussels. I grew up in Molenbeek. The whole world knows Molenbeek, not for the right reasons, unfortunately, and now its reputation has been tarnished, despite the fact that it's a popular neighborhood, very young neighborhood, multicultural, and for a few years now is showing its solidarities in these neighborhoods. Molenbeek is a municipality that is perhaps 2 kilometers from here, and perhaps 99% of its inhabitants have probably never come to this building, here in this building, and the question should be, I mean, quite honestly, Europe, I've always been here in Brussels. I'm from Brussels. We have this major problem. There's this enormous gap between the inhabitants and this institution. We are at the crossroads, we're at a momentum. We have 2 main principles. We have climate questions, and we have a democracy question. And we don't have the choice today. Us ecologists, us progressive party, we need to reinforce Europe, but Europe, another Europe that creates links, bridges, Europe also that reassures the citizens. And today I would like to say that no country can not move forward anyhow. We talk a lot about Hungarian populism, Austrian populism, etc., but us also in Belgium, we have populisms. Us also, for the time being, there's a struggle at the level of the federal government between liberals and nationalists, Flemish nationalists regarding the immigration pact. Belgium does not want to sign it, so come on. not really well positioned to give lessons to Hungary, because us here in Belgium at a federal level, we are facing this phenomenon. It's also a paradox, really. We've just had local elections, municipal elections less than a month ago, where we had two major winners. On the one hand, nationalists, and also the far right gaining ground once again. And on the other hand, far left and Green Party. It's quite a paradox. In some municipalities, these two major winners are establishing majorities and, of course, cannot agree, obviously, which triggers negotiations, I must admit, that are rather wobbly. Us, indeed, we are in a momentum, and the progressive movements need to seek concrete answers that need to carry hope and that need to propose solutions. And I believe we are probably the most pro-Europeans. Us in Belgium, we also, I discussed nationalism, mentioned nationalism, but apart from that, I'd like to underline the fact that we are used to having to build, I repeat, solidarities beyond linguistic borders, cultural borders also. It's time consuming, obviously. It can't be done overnight. It's sometimes harsh, tough, difficult, but it's a fact. We need to seek compromises, and if not, we could jeopardize everything. We need to reconcile European with its citizens also. And when I say this, it's because Europe, marketing-wise, image-wise, branding-wise, Europe is not great. I was the minister. I was in charge of the federal funds, FEDER money. A lot of money was given for many renovation projects along the canal. I don't know if you know Brussels that well. And also, we worked in partnership with others. And when we were explaining that we were using European funds, that we wanted to do things for Europe. So Europe is not there to explain that it's about Europe, and Europe counts on a daily basis, and it's about landmarks and also benchmarks, priorities, concrete answers. Of course, I'm from the Green Party, so I'm going to talk about the climate because it's an important moment. Climate is today. And if we succeeded in the elections, and there's a paradox today, it's that the citizens, families, and women, I must admit, because we have a lot of young women stating today that we no longer want this air pollution. A lot of you perhaps live in Brussels, and it's true that air pollution and mobility, these are major priorities for our children. We want cleaner air, obviously. And on the other hand, we also have the gilets jaunes, as we call them, very angry. They are against the increase of the price of petrol, and we all understand that this they are annoyed, and it's they are annoyed at a global level. Some today indeed seem to be fighting ecology. Today this debate is extremely important on the basis of this question of the gilets jaunes. It leads us back to our fundamental fight, struggle, climate change battle, social battle. And when I was the Minister of Environment and Energy, I used to like stating that today we need to seize opportunities. We need to move towards this green economy. These are not just words. It's about walking the talk. It's about creating jobs. Also, it's about managing waste. It's about sustainable development, sustainable construction. Quite honestly, today we can create jobs for the 40% of unemployed people in Molenbeek or other municipalities in Brussels. And of course, it's about fighting for social rights. And since the beginning, I've been an ecologist for more than 30 years now, 3-0. Since the outset, since the beginning, I would say that I'm an ecologist of sustainable cities, green cities, towns, but we need to strike a balance between the sustainable neighborhoods and between some were presenting us as presenting punishment programs, and that's wrong, of course. We are looking for answers at a social level also. Like to end in saying that very important policy has to do with education, and it's probably the youngsters that today are the most pro-Europeans, and they need more manoeuvring space, quite honestly. They need more jobs also. You have jobs, but you also have employment, but also projects. You have the mobility of the youth in Europe. The youth is concerned. You have Brexit. You have other things. This mobility is also an opening. I'd like to end in saying that between Democrats, obviously, we have differences. I don't agree with everything with the different parties from the left wing or far left wing parties, but when you take our programs, we probably have more things in common than the contrary. And it's not the moment, I would say, to divide ourselves. If we do not unite our forces, we're going to lose ground in Europe, but also we're going to lose ground at an international level. In a fortnight, no, less than that, in a week, we're going to have COP climate. And I can tell you that some are looking, a lot of people, you have a lot of observers in China, in Africa, and in other places. And of course, Europe, these last few years, climate-wise, we weren't expressing ourselves with one voice. We need to be united more than ever because perspectives, we're talking 2030, 2050, but also 2020, and 2020 is tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup pour vos idées, vos réflexions.
Thank you for your ideas and thoughts. Please stay for the debate. I'm asking my colleague to animate the discussions. Florent is going to animate the discussions. Please stay with us. Bear with us.
Thank you very much. You can put your headphones on. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Put some southern rhythm in the room. Muchas gracias, Ernest, y muchas gracias a todas y todos por seguir aquí. Lo cierto es que para mí son fechas importantes. Hace exactamente 70 años,
Effectivement,
mi abuela, Victoria, cruzaba la frontera franco-alemana en Estrasburgo. Como refugiada de guerra polaca, buscaba un futuro mejor para sus hijos y sus descendientes. Lo cierto es que lo ha conseguido y yo aquí estoy y además defendiendo también ahora en Estrasburgo lo que ella quería, que era una Europa unida y una Europa de paz.
Can you wait for a minute so that the translators start translating? Because we're missing the wonderful ideas you have put into us. Yeah?
Just tell me when they're over.
Well.
Just sound check.
They're checking.
C'est dommage de me recouper juste au moment le plus émouvant quand même. Just in an emotional time, just being cut about that.
Sorry about mate.
Mais c'est bon, on a une traduction, on n'a pas de traduction.
Yes, sorry, wrong channel.
Después de este corte ahí emocional.
Sorry, after this emotional cut, I would like to remind you that in this moment of attacks, strong attacks, of united Europe that we all wanted, have different answers to give. Wrong answer from the elites of traditional parties. It's a cosmetic answer, as we saw not long ago when the minister in France, Nicolas Hulot, left, and he couldn't stay in Macron governments because actually what the lobbyists were the ones who governed, or the governors of the house of these cosmetic policies from the elites, what we actually have is social frustration that we have it in France, in Greece, in Spain, social frustration that tries to recover the parties from far right, from Salvini, Le Pen, Orban, or Kaczynski. What we have is a social frustration that shapes a Europe of confrontation, Europe of hatred, of xenophobia, Europe that is everybody against everybody, that instead of saying refugees welcome is saying refugees go home. And this is very dangerous because it opens the door from the old ghosts that we have already experienced 70 years ago. And we are here today because we have to think together how to face xenophobia, hatred, and have a Europe that welcomes solidarity, open arms. We need to think together what we're going to do to face nationalisms that are exclusive, how to have a welcoming Europe, an open Europe, and how to face business lobbies, the climate urgence, inequality. How can we have a Europe where the new economic model is based on decent job and a transition towards an ecological and fair transition? As you were saying at the beginning, the most important thing is that ecologies and equality go together hand in hand. And to deepen in these concepts, I'm gonna give the floor to the audience and the MEPs here present that would like to intervene. Could be comments or questions. Here we have many people that have traveled a long way to be here, except for our colleague here from Molenbeek. So I'm going to give the floor. I just ask you to introduce yourselves and to be brief so many people can have the opportunity to intervene. And I'm going to change one MEP with a person from the audience. I'm going to start with a colleague that I have here today with me, Luca Cazzelli. I hope I said her name correctly. She's a co-president of the Independent Commission of the Sustainability Report. You can go raising your hands, and I'm going to go writing down MEP audience until the end. Probably a last minute from the people here in the table. Luca.
This really provides hope for all of us that the Progressive Alliance for a Sustainable Europe is possible. Allow me to say just a few things about this report on sustainable equality, which is actually can form the basis for our discussion in the future. What is kind of innovative in this report? 5 elements. First of all, that it promotes an agenda for radical change. It's not only marginal changes, but it's a radical action. And we need radical action and radical change in Europe to promote well-being for all. We need radical change to underpin democracy. We need radical change to reignite the European project and make it sustainable. Second point is that it is based on sustainability, and this is part of its strategy. Our government signed 3 years ago the Sustainable Development Goals. We have not implemented them in Europe. We have not even started thinking about how to translate them into concrete policy actions. Sustainability has something which is extremely important. It ties us all together. It ties economic factors, social factors, and ecological factors. And part of the innovative approach of this report is that it provides the linkages between the three, the trade-offs, and the policy choices that can be based on it. So sustainability is actually one of the innovative aspects of this report. The third important innovation is that it presents a vision for a just and equitable Europe, a strategy based on sustainability, and 110 very concrete policy actions across the 3 dimensions. Fourth, to enable change, you need to change governance. And with this governance in Europe, we cannot go very far. So what it does, it replaces the Growth and Stability Pact with the Sustainability Pact. And it embeds the Sustainability Pact into a 3-year or multi-annual sustainable development cycle. It proposes to create 2 boards, because we have absolutely no monitoring and evaluation system in Europe. The IMF, at least, has an independent monitoring agency which monitors policies and evaluates them. In Europe, we have nothing. So part of the sustainability cycle, we propose 2 boards, one for the well-being and one for the regulations and the policies. And the last innovative part of this report is that it creates a scoreboard which is very much integrated into the sustainable semester, into this annual exercise of a sustainable semester, actually deriving KPIs or objectives that can help us in designing sustainable policies, in monitoring policies, and in evaluating policies and their impact. And it is from this scoreboard that we propose that both policies at the national level and at the EU level can be monitored, evaluated, and designed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this proposal of a Sustainability Pact. Maybe you know that recently we did here in the European Parliament a conference on post-growth with a lot of MEPs here present, and one of the proposals was to have this kind of Sustainability Pact instead of the actual pact that we have. So that's very close, so I think that we can merge and to put some strengths together with the same kind of objective. Ensuite, la parole pour...
Now I'm going to give the floor to my friend Edouard. He absolutely wanted to take the floor here at the plenary session. You have the floor, Edouard. Thank you very much. Just like the others, I wanted to take the floor. You didn't have to give me the floor first, but thank you anyway. Now, I'm here because this debate, within this debate, we need to try and determine the possibilities of working together, hand in hand. And based on the interventions, we seem to converge a lot, and that's reassuring in a way. Nevertheless, 30 years ago, 3-0, I'm French. I'm a French deputy. 30 years ago, 3-0, the public sphere, traditional sphere, was saying that in France we had the right wing that was completely stupid, always divided, and was losing election after election. But for 5-6 years, things have changed, and we're told now that our left-wing parties are like stupid, like crazy. We're divided. It's a bit like the small games we had in the courtyard in school to see who could do pee-pee and what we all noticed is that the far right-wing parties are becoming more and more present. Why is the question? It's about the real policies. It's my first political experience. Years ago when I was listening to European speeches, I was wondering, what are they saying? Just don't understand anything. Who are we addressing? What people are interested in, questions like, am I going to find a good job? Will I be able to pay the bills at the end of the month, look after my kids, etc.? We are in favor of transitions. We are the first victim of pollution, but we need to pay our bills, as I said at the end of the month. So will there be a green transition? And also we need to bear in mind the social side of things. We need means to start with. I'm afraid that in May is that we're perhaps not going to do what it takes, and perhaps we're going to count the left-wing parties, number of people in left-wing parties and number of people in right-wing parties. So it could be a bit of a problem, could be a bit chaotic. And it's all about walking the talk once again. We're going to have our elections, and then we could be disappointed with the results of the elections. But if we do win, and I agree we need to remain positive, optimistic, if we do win the elections, what guarantee will we have that this time, for real, we're going to implement and abide by a programme within the European Parliament? How can we tell the Council, tell everyone that we're going to abide by our programme? Will we brave enough to abide by our programme? We have an atomic weapon, luckily, that does not kill anyone. We could block, if need be, the budget. That's doable. That's one of our instruments. Can we state that if need be, we'll do what it takes to make things change and to really abide by the programme this time? We need to address those also who have decided no longer to vote. That's our public. Of course, we need a macro vision, etc. Macro, not. So why is Trump successful? It's because he condemns trade policies. It's amazing that that's the state is doing this. The World Trade Organization, can we be sufficiently brave to say that we don't want the World Trade Organization of today? We want to. So if you talk about Brexit, we're talking about commercial agreements. Some commercial agreements are going to be passed in the forthcoming years, but all these commercial agreements are absolutely all rather disgusting. That's what I wanted to say.
Merci, Edouard, pour nous rappeler l'importance du travail.
Thank you, Edouard, for reminding us that it's important to work together, hand in hand, and also the ecological transition is very important. And we have real power. We need to believe in ourselves. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm a representative of civil society and of the citizens. I'm representing the citizens. I'm not part of a political party. I'm very committed in associations, network of associations, at the level of the citizens mainly. What I'd like to say, I'd like to speak in name of the citizens. You are going to have, women, men, political women, you're going to have to be very cautious when talking about considering the citizens. Just to underline my commitment, I'd like to say that in 1990, with the downfall of the Berlin Wall, I participated in the race for Earth, etc. Just to tell you that I'm very committed climate-wise. Nevertheless, in this Europe, there are the found countries of Europe, but you have this social phenomenon. You have Madame Huytebroeck. She discussed the gilets jaunes, as we call them here, and I'm not going to repeat what we've heard on TV, RTB, RTL, but also there are discussions, debates with the political actors. I'd like to draw your attention on what follows. We have citizens that mobilized the Gilets jaunes outside of any political party and outside of any social organization, and especially outside, not with the trade unions. As a trade unionist, I would say that for years I had my green gilet vert to fight with the gilet rouge, so the reds, the greens, now the yellows. We're fighting this liberalism, these liberal movements, but we didn't reach our objective. So what's very important, and if you hear what's said, all these testimonies, the citizen is struggling on a daily basis. That's also my case, by the way. I'm struggling on a daily basis. Vis-à-vis the politicians, what are they saying? They're telling us some things, and the politicians are not aware of the problems of the wage earner. We talk about the transition, I'm committed, and I must say, climate is extremely important. It's about the survival of the planet. We have to be very cautious because measures are going to be taken for the environment and for ecology, and also you have the social part. we need to avoid any confrontation between the social part and the green part. If not, we're going to have problems with the citizens that can't pay their bills at the end of the day, at the end of the month. We've talked about the poverty threshold. Some are beyond, and therefore for them it's really important to give them priority, those that are living under the poverty threshold. We need to bear in mind all the others that are encountering problems, despite the fact that they are a little bit above the poverty threshold, but it's not enough. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour votre témoignage.
Thank you very much for this testimony. Next speaker, Amy.
George, and then you.
Thank you. I would propose that we think about the point of departure for all our deliberations. And I would propose that this point of departure are all those people suffering today. Our colleague from Marseille used the word suffering. And on this basis, I would make 3 points. The first is what is happening in France at the moment, the yellow shirts. These are people protesting against the rise in taxes, which rise in taxes is explained because we have to fight climate change. And clearly, the position should be, sure, we fight climate change, but not with 1% more rise in taxes. The charge for this fight has to be on those who are generating huge mega profits out of all sorts of exploitative activities and who are not suffering. No, we don't want to make them suffer deeply, but let us make them pay what they are due to pay. What does this mean in practical terms as policy? No to the Stability and Growth Pact. Yes to the Sustainability, Ecology, Social Pact. This is a colossal fight because we are hearing time and again that no, there is another crisis coming. There has to be austerity. We do not forget about austerity. So point number 1 is a complete turnaround of budgetary policy at the European level and at the national level. No more taxes for the suffering. All the charges on those that have the money and should pay. Point number 2, a decent job for a decent life in every member state and in every region. Our Polish friend touched on what is the huge problem for all of us in Eastern Europe. There have been migration of millions of people, not because they were so happy to leave home, but because they couldn't find a job back home and they couldn't sustain their living because of what happened with this enlargement, because it was an enlargement along the lines of free market competition. So a decent job, and Gabi Zimmer was talking. In the treaties, it says that this should be a social market economy with full employment. Let there be full employment. And point number 3 is the issue of democracy. We have to make the case for a sovereign people with a sovereign right to fight for their rights, all those rights that we're talking about. And the notion of sovereign democracy should be something which we make a living example of every day in every meeting, explaining to people that it is they who can change if they are together, if they are in solidarity. Edouard was asking, why did the right rise? Because it addressed the suffering people. But what did it tell them? It's the migrants that are threatening you. It's the people outside that are threatening you. We have to close in. But they don't tell them that it is the bankers that are with the power making for this light. And it is the Commission which is serving the bankers. So let us show the people whom they should fight and how they should be together.
Thank you very much for recording these three important points of austerity, decent jumps, and democracy. And let's go to the next speaker, just behind you. Yeah, vous.
Oui, Pierre Dumoulin.
Pierre Dumoulin. I'm against obsolescence. We've been working with the repair cafes to fix all of that. So who opened the door to the right? Well, I think it's in part the left who opened the door to the right, a specific left. You know, when you look at Charleroi, the affairs in Brussels, even the Washington Post spoke about the Belgian situation with a lot of mirth. So we need to be consistent, but we're not being consistent. Let's take the ecology. We said let's use diesel. Then 10 years after, stop diesel, buy a gasoline car. Now it's an electrical vehicle. If you buy an electrical car and you drive it in China, it's powered by coal. Once we have green electricity, yes, maybe, but you need rare earth and precious metals to manufacture those cars. But we are between Russia and the States. We see what's happening in Crimea. The USSR was invading Finland. They were not reliable and no one helped. Not the UK, not Europe. No one helped Finland. Finland had to ask assistance from Germany to fight Russia. We tend to forget this sometimes. Of course, we depend upon the United States, but the United States have only one priority: to keep the dollar as the negotiating main currency, not in euro, not in yuans. And what is Belgium doing? Well, they buy American fighter jets because the Typhoon is not reliable, because we didn't receive an offer for the Rafale French plane aircraft. So not consistent. Why? Because they sold this at such an expensive price to India that didn't want to offer discount to Belgium. Well, what I'm saying is that we need to be consistent and logical in all of this. Our politicians should think about this. We open the market to extreme liberalism. If we don't set rules, well, we have no choice.
Merci beaucoup. We have a...
Thank you very much.
Colleague. Yeah, that's...
Thank you. I'd only like to mention one thing. As Mr. Douzinas said, it is very important this dialogue take place bottom up. It is important it take place outside this room, outside this parliament, between people. We see the examples of the United States and of the UK. We see the labour movement in the UK. This is a very important example for all countries. I think we should use it. I would very much like to mention trade unions. And I'd like to hear your opinions about how this new effort for a new Europe, for a shift in Europe, could also lead to revitalizing the trade unions, without which I don't think we can go forward. How left and progressive political movements and parties can rejoin the trade unions, as it happens 150 years ago, with the first international union of trade unions. Because this is important once again. Let's be united. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the next... No, before... Ah, that's you. And then we'll come back here.
Merci.
Nico Cue. I'm the former secretary for metal workers here, FGTB union in Belgium. So, of course, I'm very interested in what I've heard today. You spoke about the unions, and it's a call that you're launching. And Madame Huytebroeck is here to listen to what we have to say. We are an independent union from political parties, but we think that the situation is such that we are ready and prepared to foster a dialogue between left forces in Wallonia and in Brussels, more specifically by trying as much as possible to bring together PTB party, the Greens, and the Socialist party. Well, I'm happy to see those 3 posters in front of me because we invited their secretariats and their executive bodies to get into a discussion around a common program to try to fight the right. And Madame Huytebroeck, Mrs. Huytebroeck said this, when you look at the situation in Wallonia, those forces represent 60% of the votes cast, the votes that were cast. And I think in Brussels it's the same, that just like in Wallonia. So how come we still accept austerity policies that hurt people bad? The best example is the yellow shirts who take to the street because they cannot make ends meet. I have 2 reflections, let's say. Of course, Europe, it's peace first and foremost. It's democracy, climate, but social as well. It's the social aspect. If we do not manage to reassure the people, the workers, also the workers who are below the threshold of poverty, those masses will go elsewhere, will not lean to the left. Trump, Salvini, what are they saying? They are saying, don't worry about the climate, don't worry about democracy. You will still have a job with me, and it's too bad if we keep polluting. Of course, it's not decent because it's in the long term, it's a likely death. But what I don't see, this is why I'm asking the question, I don't see a discussion on what the industry will be like tomorrow to comply with the climate challenge. What products should we build? We mentioned the obsolescence, but what products with what raw material, and can recycling help us have our own raw materials? It's a question, but just 2 examples like this. We have developed a very voluntaristic policy in Wallonia and in Brussels regarding the solar panels. So this solar autonomy, power autonomy, and public authorities are trying to encourage and to give incentive to people to build this. And we supported that because it's local employment. We said that will create a number of solar installation, and at the same time our photovoltaic production was very close to us here in Belgium. Well, we had to stop this because we decided to import Chinese solar panels at a really low cost. So the Belgian companies had to go belly up. But what did we win with all this? What did Europe win by accepting this flow of low-cost products, solar panels built in China with other working conditions? That's the question I'm asking. And in Belgium, we have the first private tax. What is this? It means that when you buy an appliance, well, you pay 2-3 euros to then recycle it. And what do? We collect all those appliances. Collection works well. We put them on a ship, and they go to Taiwan, they go to China to be dismantled and recycled and so on. So we take the tax, we sell the ship to a company X or a company Y, but we don't get the raw material back. We sell it. I think we need to ponder this. And it was in the DNA of Europe. regulating the market of coal and steel so as never to have this again. But now, where do we stand after the end of this in 2002? Well, we are in a full liberalization. We don't regulate anything anymore. We make free sign free trade agreements that hurt producers in Europe, and we are the champion for open competition. You know, when multinationals come to Europe, it's free of tax to them. They make benefits, they make profits, they have subsidies and so on, and then they leave. It's like you go to a distribution, a supermarket, you take whatever you want, and then you don't pay for the damage that you make, you don't buy the products. It's to those questions that we need to give an answer if we are to be successful, if we want to be successful for the climate, for the European social model that we want to export. And Edouard Martin mentioned this. We need to have criteria for the working conditions that are a reality for the manufacturing of some products that we allow to import here. If the left does not table an answer, we'll have a problem. Of course, there is always the question of money. But since the crisis, up to now, the European Central Bank, and it's the figures given at Bilbao not so long ago, say that 5,000 billion euros were necessary to buy the debts of banks. But we should have a social policy, even just half of that money, to meet the social challenge, the climate challenge. In this coming campaign, this election campaign, we need to explain the type of Europe that we want.
Merci beaucoup pour poser une question.
Thank you very much for tabling such a question. What will be the industry of tomorrow, taking into account the social and the ecological challenge? We'll need to give an answer. The last round table, before I give the floor back to the speakers, because then we have a conclusion from Elie and Guillaume. So for people who want to take the floor, please be concise so that we have time then to give the floor back to the panelists and then to wrap up. So here, the front, MEP, Maite, and two speakers in the audience. And let's take one MEP, then one external speaker, and so on.
President, I have to say that I'm very pleased about what was happening today, about this exchange of ideas and a kind of minimum alliance, but I'm not satisfied on the proposals that have been made. Because we have to admit one thing, that the rise of the extreme right and this very aggressive neoliberal capitalism that is dominating right now is also our fault. We have done mistakes. We have to admit our mistakes. And also we have to change, to radical change. I listened to some very nice proposals, like the one from Costas Douzinas about the organization, but we need to change completely. We need to change ourselves in order to change Europe and the society, etc. And we have not changed so far. And that's why the extreme right is still rising and rising and rising. I'll give you an example to finish with this. We are talking about the extreme right all the time and the danger of the extreme right. All right. But for the most of the people, for the young people especially, extreme right does not say something. They don't know what it's all about. They don't know. Some of them know, but some of them they don't know. So we have to give them examples of what it means to have the extreme right. And we have examples here in this Parliament. In every decision that concerns, social rights, working hours rights, women's rights, young minorities' rights, young people's rights, they are voting all against. Recently we voted for the 8 hours working hours for the professional drivers. They did not vote, including the conservative forces, including the Popular Party. We said, okay, you don't want to 8 hours, you want them to drive 12 hours to go back home. Okay, let's give them, after 4.5 hours of driving, let's give them a pause of 30 minutes. They said no. So they want for the drivers to be killed and to kill also some of us or the passengers driving by. So I'm giving this example because we have to make concrete proposals. We have not to think that some things are obvious. For the majority of the people and for the young people are not obvious, and we have to change that. We have to change our mentality.
Thank you very much. Doy la palabra a Maite del Partido de la...
I give the floor to Maite from the Left Party. Thank you very much. I need to tell you that I'm more optimistic than my colleague that preceded me, because I believe that it's true that we're trying to do something that the left, the Green, the Social Democrats, all together, all the progressive forces hadn't been able to do before in Europe. This debate is very interesting. The creation of Progressive Caucus is a good example. What happened in Bilbao some weeks ago, where we got together 120 organizations, different movements, trade unions, political parties, where there was a debate, a strong debate with the trade unions, a feminist debate. Let's not forget about that. There was a debate between the young people, a very important one. I think that we are really trying to make an effort to leave aside what separates us, to center us in what unites us. So I believe that this is the hope, that where we should work together to be able to change and to really be able to explain in a simple way and a pedagogical way why we don't need to vote the far right. And we need to go to the streets, to the institutions to speak up. I think that would unite us, apart from the ecological concept, the democratical concept, apart from the solidarity concept, and the feminist one, is that we should have clear in mind this red string of peace that was talking, the RAZEM colleague here commented before. I think that we can construct something good together. So this type of debates and meetings are very important, and I wanted to thank you and thank the invitation.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very much, Maite, over here and at the back.
Costa Comunista, trade unionist as well. Metal workers, FGTB, Wallonia, Brussels. So here's what I want to say. What's happening today, I see many people even at this hour in the room. So it's a pleasure to see that people are still here. You know, we need to think about the workers. We need to convey our message to the workers, to the people who will vote. You know, we need to send that message to households. Our message must be conveyed to the kitchen tables. You know, what do we fight for? Well, we fight for social issues, for freedom, for a better life, in fact. Whether it's ecology, social democracy, the workers speak about this every day in their families. They speak about this. But our narrative is not listened to. We see the narrative of the right in the media, and we see the extreme right. as well. The extreme right is coming and conveying its messages in the families, and we don't manage to do that. Why? Because we don't have a single message. We all give our own message, and we do not manage to penetrate the barriers to go to the family level. For trade unions, it's the same problem as well. However, 1 week ago, we managed to do something. We managed to have one European Trade Union Day through the Industrial Trade Union for the Industry, and this will take place in April. It was not easy to achieve this, but it should be easy. We see everywhere social rights are being attacked, so it should be simple to have a European Day of Action, but no, it was really hard. We had to have very tough discussion, but in the end we managed to have this decision so as to establish this European Day of Action. And it's a victory. We need to communicate around this. What I'm saying is that it's the weakness of the trade union and not the left. Our weakness, what is it? Is that we don't walk the talk. We don't say what we're doing. We don't disseminate enough. We need to disseminate. We need to say, to explain to people what we do. We need to tell them that today at 7 p.m. there's 100 people in Brussels who are trying to have a discussion, to have another Europe, to table progressive ideas. As, okay, maybe a manifesto, a document, we could work on this to disseminate this document. We should draft something like this. It's not about having 50 ideas, but we could agree on 4 or 5 ideas to say we're in favor of this, favor of that. We can agree on 5 and 4 or 5 things that we are opposed to. We're opposed to extreme right, far right. We're opposed to exclusion. We need to say this, state this, and we should disseminate this to workers. The extreme right has not won. I'm optimistic. I don't think they have won. And there is an important phase. It's the European elections. European elections. If we do not manage to come with a unified left message from the left, if we do, like the message that I see on the posters, if people are not interested in what we have to say, the extreme right will continue to rise. And if they continue, they might win the race. As a sportswoman, you spoke about a boxing match. I'm from Belgium, so I speak about cycling, because we have cycling races. But what I mean is that we need to win the race. And I'm sure, I'm convinced, I'm persuaded that if we manage to have this discussion at the family level, we can counter the far right. Can you turn off the mic? Thank you. In the last intervention. We need to save the public services. They are wobbling left, right, and center. We need to redefine public service. What is public service? What's it all about? Today, public services are defined as services funded by the state, but it's the bad definition. It's a bad definition. Public services do not play a financial role. That's what people think. No, what we need to say is that public services are aimed at ensuring access to several fundamental rights. That's what we need to say. Housing, you've got housing, you've got education, and so on. Public service needs to guarantee this for everyone, to make it universal. If you define it this way, the private sector will not want this anymore. The private sector is buying this for 1 symbolic euros. Well, they will give this symbolic euro back to us. And we need to do that. Because public services will come back to the hands, into the public fold, into the hands of the state, and it will help us get out of this crisis. And we would have been able to do this. You know, when you pay taxes to the state, it's a sort of loan, and the state gives it back to you when you're in need. But the state considers that they can do anything they want, everything they want with the money, and they give the money to the banks. But the banks were the culprits. We're at fault here. What we need to do is to get back to recover this public money, to help people in need, to foster education, to have a better justice system, and so on. That's a first item. Second item, we need to have binding laws, binding rules. When you have a rule, a law that is not binding, it does not work. It leads to the opposite effect, in fact. Because of unfair competition, what do we see? It's the most disrespectful people who come out ahead. How come you can do something good? If when you do something good, you're punished. If you do something bad, you're given prize, you're given money and so on. Yes, I'm speaking very fast, I'm trying. So what is the rule first? What is a rule? A rule is an objective to reach, and you have a procedure to reach this objective. Well, we can go step by step. The idea is to, for example, have fundamental rights, human rights, access to human rights for everyone. There are procedures to reach this, paying taxes and so on, behaviors. So what we need to do is to define the right procedures and to set the right goals. Because then you have the constraints. What are the constraints? Control on the one hand and sanction on the other. Controls must be carried out. We must control procedures and then assess whether we have reached the objective. And if the procedure is not the right one, if it does not meet the goal, then we change it. Because the objective should not change. Like Montesquieu said, they are the spirit of the law. So we make checks, controls, and we should avoid conflicts of interest. But you have to make those checks unannounced. I mean, if you go and check a kitchen, but if you warn people, well, the cockroaches are swept away, under the rug. But if there are no sanctions, then it's useless. And if there are no controls, well, the goals are useless. It's a whole chain. It's a whole cycle. We must close the loop, but there are empty spaces in that loop, so it's useless. But if you steal a banana, you'll be punished. You'll go to jail, for sure, no problem. If you're a big-time thug, no problem. No sanction, nothing. And that's really important. Let's not make laws that people don't believe in. Then people will not believe in justice, will not believe in democracy. It will be useless. And that would be the end of humanity. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have to leave the room by 7:30. Quickly, if I may. Where would you have to finish? VAT, what about proper VAT? You need a dual system. It should be progressive in a dual way based on the purchasing power of someone. It's not normal that a poor person pays as much as a rich person. Then the rich person is going to think, wait a minute, I'm okay. Laws don't apply to me. I can do whatever because I can pay, if need be. That's a problem, you see. It needs to be progressive based on the purchasing power of people. No. Sorry. These are very important things. Okay? We want to make things move. It can be done quite easily, all that. Thank you.
The three people that we have, I just have to excuse Evelyne, that she has to leave at 7. But just 2 minutes, please. Just a very few conclusions. That's to be very fast, and then we give the floor to Guillaume and Ellie.
Okay, thank you for this fantastic discussion. I would like just to address a few things. There was a call to change ourselves before we can change the European Union. I couldn't agree more, but I think that in order to change, to make this change, we need to give the voice to people who aren't us. We need to actually give the voice to people, to citizens, basically, not to keep the floor only to ourselves. And in that spirit, I would like to agree with the gentleman over there who said about the need to close the gap between politicians and citizens. Of course, we should do that, and I think we can do that. We can do that on local level. We can do that by helping citizens and citizens' movements. Just to give you an example, in this year's local and regional elections in Poland, ran the biggest number of women ever, and a lot of these women became political not longer ago than in 2016 during the mass protests against the total ban of abortion. And they just became political, and right now they are city councils and other members of other institutions. In order to politicize citizens, we also need to make sure by many means that no citizens has to feel like second-class citizen. That we can do by social and economical means, but also by political means, such as bottom-up decision processes, voting rights, participatory measures. And of course, in this process, the tight cooperation between the left in general and trade unions is crucial. Trade unions, in my opinion, are the best place where workers can become political and politically involved. It's the very same sense, in the very same sense that women become political when fighting in defense of their basic rights. We need to, those are simple solutions, but we need to start as left to talk and to invite citizens to talk with us, to create proposals and concrete ideas to be implemented in different policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start by congratulating Mr. Papadimoulis and the executive of the Progressive Caucus, because I think it is precisely the kind of initiative we need. Also the Marseille Forum, Progressive Forum, the Bilbao meeting, and so on. This is what we need, and we need perhaps to institutionalize it. Have more of these meetings so we can exchange views, but also understand the different perspectives that each one of us has. Because while we are generally agreed, and it was very clear from the debate, we come from different perspectives with different national priorities and so on. Now, let me become a little more optimistic, because I heard the cries of despair, of disappointment. We are at a hard time. It is a difficult time. But I think it is also a time of optimism. I think it is very clear that neoliberalism is on the decline. If we move to the international scene, what we used to call the West in the Cold War is in decline. We are in a transitional period where the old is dying but has not died yet, and the new has not been born yet. Therefore, as Gramsci said, we are in the time of the monsters. We are in the time of the monsters, but these are the monsters that succeed and have succeeded so far because we have failed. And it seems to me that it is quite possible to change this game. We in Greece, SYRIZA, is the only radical left party that has gained government, not power, government at least. And I tell you what, we used in order to get that a combination of class politics, then of popular sovereignty ideas, that a respect for the dignity of people, and finally democracy. The ballot box, the ballot paper, and the streets, occupying the palace of parliament and occupying the squares. That kind of combination between official politics, power of the state, power of the institutions, and the transformative power of the people I was talking about earlier, which brought SYRIZA to power. We need to go back, not just us, the Greeks, but I think all of us, we need to go back and talk again to the movements, to the resistance movements, to social economy and so on. We have to reimagine the world. So I want to finish in a point of optimism, as I said, because we are, the left and the progressive forces, the only people who can really imagine a new future in which As I said, the West is in decline. Power and resources is moving to the East, to China and India. Our leaders have no idea about this. We have to think about those things together. We have to come up with new grand utopias, as I said, and of course the more specific policy initiatives that we heard earlier about sustainability. But we also need to see the larger picture, because it is the larger picture that can talk to those people who feel humiliated, abandoned, impoverished, that nobody takes care of their interests or listens to their voice. So I would finish by saying we failed, we will try again, we will fail better, and then we will also win. Thank you.
To end briefly, I was listening carefully to all of you, and what we all notice really is that Europe should become a place full of hope, of social promises for all the citizens in Europe. We need to mobilize for those who are unemployed, for those who are suffering on a daily basis. I would say that the left wing did not do what it should have done. It should have walked the talk, and that's why I would say that this meeting, nevertheless, is full of hope. For a Europe full of hope, dignity, more human Europe. So thanks again for your efforts on a daily basis. Thanks to all of you in your respective countries. So thank you very much. Thank you for these last interventions. It's true that there's a clear sentence. Far right, the monster, has not won the war, the battle, because in some countries it's the Greens that are coming up, in others left-wing parties are coming up. There's a struggle, there's a fight. You have the black Europe against this progressive Europe. We're here to battle, to fight, and we are at a key moment at the crossroads. These are not just usual European elections. These are crucial European elections. It's about the future, the true, real future of Europe. Xenophobia, facing solidarity, ecology, democracy, and it's up to us to win the battle. We are relying on all of you. Thank you.
Non, mais je vais rester là, je vais faire rapide. Non, je vais rester là, comme ça c'est plus simple. Les gens veulent partir, c'est normal.
Guillaume Ballas, a few last words. I'm Guillaume Ballas. I'm a European deputy. I was at the initiative with the Progressive Caucus friends. I've been part of the adventure for 5 years. Briefly, I'm very upset, very annoyed. Why? Well, because we managed, us, the Progressive Caucus, we implemented a brilliant initiative. I'm speaking globally, not just about today. We had, after all, a dialogue between progressive parties from different groups. Then we managed to act together. When Greece ended up under this crazy troika policy, we contributed, make things move. We made things move. We prepared themes. When Juncker said that there were 5 possible scenarios for the European Union, we said that we have a 6th scenario. We discussed it with 150 NGOs, by the way. They had their 6th scenario, and we saw that civil society and political forces, people from Green Party, from social democracy, radical left-wing parties, all left-wing parties, how we could all work together. Then we addressed each other, we had dialogue, we had debates, the big European parties, the big European families, brainstormed, and then we thought, wait a minute, if we all agree to say that Europe today is suffering from a major deficit at the level of democracy, if we all agree that ecology should be at the forefront of our concerns, and of course we need to find ecological answers, we need to redistribute wealth. We cannot have neoliberal ecology. There's only one progressive ecology, social ecology. If we're all together, why aren't we all together? Question mark. Because we are stating it So how come we're not making it work? But the only answers that we obtained, we kept hearing it's too early. I mean, come on, there are structures, cumbersome structures to move everything. It's complicated. And then I'm wondering if it's not too late sometimes. In my country, we have les gilets jaunes, yellow jackets. Gilets jaunes as we call them here. But I had dialogues with these. It's a great. It's kind of they're against all these inequalities. We want to make things change. Up to when are we going to carry on stating it's too early? How long is it going to take before we decide to change, before we decide to stop saying it's too early to do this and that, to walk the talk? And we don't want it to be too late, because others will have walked the talk and with totally different approaches. Here, quite honestly, we need to launch a call to civil society, to the trade unions, NGOs. We need to call upon citizens. We need to put pressure right, left and centre, even before the elections. We need to make sure that this, it's all absurd. I mean, we're here, we all think the same thing, but we're divided, and meaning that the right-wing parties are moving forward, and that should stop, obviously. Thank you.
Is dividing you from your dinner, so I have fully that responsibility in mind. I thank you all for the very, very interesting discussion of today. My name is Ellie Schlein. Despite the exotic name, I'm a member of the European Parliament from Italy. And just to be very short, because what Guillaume said is what I think, and that's the point on which I would like to start. A very brief reflection with you. We are in front of an historical paradox. An international of nationalists, like the Friends of the European Spring like to call them. But we see it clearly in Italy right now. Mr. Salvini strengthens Mr. Orban, Ms. Le Pen, Mr. Trump, and vice versa, with the same rhetoric of hatred, intolerance, and walls. And if you think about it, it's a paradox, because brought to the end, that rhetoric brings them one against the other on the opposite sides of the wall they dream to build. But the point is, they are stealing from us the internationalism. Where are we if they strengthen each other? Why? For example, I was talking about the press in Italy the other day on the Portuguese government. You know that most of the people in Italy do not even know that there is a left government in Portugal. Why that? Why the achievements on fighting inequalities of that government does not strengthen the rest of the European left progressive and environmentalist forces? And it's true that we criticise Mr. Salvini when he sends out an SMS to the extreme right candidate during the election in Sweden. But then I think about myself and I do some self-criticism and I say, look, to whom have I sent a message for the Swedish election? To no one. But we are here together with people that think the same. And if we think about what is, let's say, preventing the European project from being the very good idea in the mind of our founding mothers and fathers, the Manifesto of Ventotene, a European Union of more opportunities for the young generation, okay? If you think the same about the fight to inequalities, about the fight for tax justice, which is another thing on which we managed to find very ambitious position in this Parliament on transparency, because these multinational companies are stealing our future with up to 1,000 billion euros a year. You can imagine it's about 3 Juncker plan of investment. So the point is, on tax justice, on a fairer sharing of responsibilities, on welcoming in a dignified and human manner migrants and refugees in the European Union, on the issue of the social dimension solution that the European Union desperately needs. Gabi Zimmer talked about a minimum income scheme. Other options are available. And on the issue also, and finally, of the climate change and what we need to do to make sure that we feel the responsibility we have on the next generation, on this very delicate issue. You know what happened in my country? Have you seen the picture? I was on Sunday in Belluno, in the northern part of Italy. There are thousands of trees that were completely destroyed by a strong wind and by some rain. Look at those pictures, because this is the way we are unfortunately leading if we're not able to find a strong alternative. So my final point would be, in this House, with the Progressive Caucus, when we manage to form the Progressive and Green Front that should be able at the European level to confront the International of Nationalists, when we did it inside this Parliament, we won important fights without even having the numbers. Let's be honest. I was a rapporteur for the reform of the Dublin regulation on asylum. Judith Sargentini was the rapporteur on Hungary. We managed to stick together to push the Liberals and to push also the Popular Party, and we won. That's why I think this is the way through, and this is also the heritage that we would like to give to the next Parliament. And my last point would be, we need to confront the nationalism and the selfishness of the national governments by having more European parties, more European press, more European trade unions and associations that fight the selfishness at the same level and win, as we did with the beautiful protest of the Czarny protest, the black protest of the black women, of the Polish women. We managed to make it a real progressive, a real European protest, and we managed to win it. We have to do the same on so many different issues, and I was so honoured in these years here to work with other people like Dimitrios, like Eduard, like Florent, like Guillaume, like Agnieszka, of which I'm a big fan. It's a privilege for us because we see that even in different national contexts, but we are moved by the same values, we are using the same words, we are fighting the same fights. If we manage to communicate a common vision for the future of the European Union and our member states, then we will probably be strong and win. Thanks a lot.
C'est fini, hein?
And the interpreter is with you.
Il faut féliciter les...
So congratulations to the interpreters. They did a great job, and I'm with you guys. So I'm an interpreter, and I'm with you.
Thank you.